Professor Alistair Finch's greatest achievement was not the Chronos displacement array itself, beautiful sculpture of humming gold rings and crystalline circuitry. It was his calibration tool, a neural interface small and precise enough to be worn by his subject, a sleek black cat named Bastet. She was the perfect pilot. Agile, unpredictable, and possessing a singular focus he could guide with simple stimuli. She didn't travel physically. Her consciousness was projected, a quantum ghost observing the past. Their first jumps were brief, breathtaking successes. Bastet, lured by the flicker of a laser pointer only she could see, would leap from her podium and her mind would land elsewhere. Alistair watched through her eyes as she stalked a dragonfly in the carboniferous swamps, a silent spectator to giants. He guided her through the marble halls of Rome, her feline form phasing through sandaled feet. Time was a river, and Bastet was his nimble little boat. But time is not a river. It is a fragile interlocking mechanism, and Bastet, for all her grace, was a wrench thrown into its gears. The error was born of a paradox, not of logic, but of instinct. Alistair had projected her into a Viking longhouse, circa 870 AD. The goal was to observe a chieftain's burial rite. Bastet, however, was focused on her guiding light, point dancing near a corner where a mouse, real and terrified, scurried. She pounced. It was a perfect hunt, a kill executed with millennia of ingrained precision. But as her phantom claws closed, a spark of quantum entanglement flared. The mouse was not just a mouse. It was the specific ancestor of a lineage that, 12 centuries later, would be the subject of a lab experiment that first gave Alistair the idea for temporal observation. The mouse died. The timeline shuddered. Bastet's next jump was supposed to be to the Cretaceous period. Alistair, unaware of the rupture he had just facilitated, initiated the sequence. But the Chronos array, its calculations now based on a corrupted causal chain, spatter out into a different kind of jungle. The hedgerows of Normandy, France, June 7, 1944, the world exploded into sound and fury. Bastet, a creature of silence, was bombarded by the thunder of artillery, staccato rip of machine guns, the screams of men. Her instincts screamed louder than the array's safety protocols. She was no longer an observer, she was prey. She bolted, her spectral form darting through the legs of soldiers. A young private, his face smeared with mud and blood, saw a flicker of movement, a black cat, an omen of death in the midst of hell. He stumbled, his boot catching on a root. A burst of German gunfire tore through the space his head had just occupied, eviscerating the man behind him. The private lived. He would go on to have a family, a grandson who would become a prominent historian whose work would inspire a young Alistair Finch. The timeline, already bleeding, now hemorrhaged. Alistair watched in horror from his lab. His screens showed Bastet's vitals spiking, her neural load reaching critical levels. Warnings flashed, causality breach, paradox imminent. He tried to pull her back, but the array was losing its anchor. Time was fighting back against the infection. Bastet, terrified and disoriented, didn't understand the pull. She only knew she was being hunted. In a final, desperate act of self-preservation, her mind sought the one place her primal memory associated with absolute safety. The last stable point before the madness. The Viking longhouse. She jumped herself. The array screamed. Alistair was thrown from his console as the machinery overloaded. He looked up to see not one, but two projection screens active. One showed the longhouse moments after her first visit. The other showed the same longhouse now. In the first screen, the Vikings were gathered around the dead mouse, speaking in low, concerned tones. In the second screen, Bastet's form materialized, her fur on end, hissing at the phantoms of a war yet to come. The Vikings, already spooked, saw the same black cat, the Amun, appear from thin air, its eyes glowing with unnatural fear. A giant of a man, the chieftain, roared and threw his axe. It was a perfect throw. In the lab, Alistair watched the axe fly in horrifying slow motion on one screen. On the other, he saw the past Bastet, having just killed the mouse, look up at the shouting Norseman. Her curiosity piqued. The axe meant for the future. Bastet found its mark in the past Bastet. The paradox detonated. Time did not rewrite itself. Shattered. The lab dissolved around Alistair. For a terrifying moment, he existed everywhere at once. He saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex stomp through a burning Roman forum. He saw Viking longships beaching on the shores of Normandy under a hail of arrows and artillery. He saw Bastetta, 1,000 Bastetsin, every time, each one dying in a different, brutal way. Torn by dinosaurs, crushed by marble, shot by rifles, struck by axes. Blood, red and universal, splashed across all of history simultaneously. It was the blood that was the constant. The one thing time could not erase. Then, silence. Alistair found himself on the floor of his lab. The Kronos array was a melted, silent ruin. The air smelled of ozone and faintly of copper. On Bastit's podium, she lay still. There was no visible wound, no mark. But her eyes were open, vacant. She was gone. Her mind had been erased from every point in the timeline, a variable scrubbed clean by the universe to restore a fragile, bloody balance. Professor Alistair Finch, the man who had mastered time, sat alone in the silence. He had not created a time machine. He had created a snare. And time, the most patient and ruthless predator of all, had finally caught his cat. The illusion was broken. Time was not a river to be navigated. It was a house of cards, and he had sent a cat to play inside it. All that was left was the memory of the blood, and the terrifying knowledge that some things, once observed, can never be unseen.